Welcome to 755 Live, about 5 minutes of what Jesus said, and you can find a different command of Jesus in a soundbite form, and also the verses that reference that at our weekday Bible plan at bible.today.church. Some other resources there to help you make Bible reading and study just a part of your everyday pattern. These 755 Lives are just to help us to understand what Jesus said so we can do what he said. And if this is meaningful to you and you find some value here, it really helps us if you like it, if you share it, if you comment. It just makes a lot of difference in helping getting the word out. Today's Jesus Said is from Matthew 6, 1 through 4. This is right before Jesus gives us the Lord's Prayer and instructions on how to pray. And he starts in verse 1 of Matthew 6 by saying, "Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven." He says in verse 2, "When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand do or know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you." Jesus said, "Be quietly generous." Now, the cultural context here, when he talks about don't be like the hypocrites in verse 2, blowing trumpets in the synagogue. Now, they weren't literally blowing trumpets, but in the temple, as you entered the entryway, there were offering boxes there, and there was a collection trumpet almost, kind of like a funnel that was made out of brass. And when you threw coins in, it would make a noise. And so Pharisees, hypocrites, those who wanted to be seen, would make sure that they put a lot in so that it would make a lot of noise and people would see that they were generous. But he said, or Jesus said, don't call attention to your acts of charity, because if you do that, if you get attention for it, that's all the reward you will ever get. And he said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. In this cultural context, the left hand, that was the private hand. That was the hand that you did things that you don't talk about. And the right hand was more the public hand. So Jesus is saying, keep your generosity private. Now, does this mean that we never give in public? Absolutely not. It's a heart issue, not an action. It's about why we do things and our attitude. Are we doing this to draw attention to ourselves? We know that giving in public isn't wrong, because in Luke 21, 1 through 4, Jesus is in the temple and he's watching people dropping their gifts in the collection box. And then this poor widow comes by and drops in a couple of pennies, 2 small coins. So she was giving in public, but she wasn't blowing a trumpet. She wasn't making a big deal out of it. She was just quietly being generous. And Jesus said in Luke 21, verse 3, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the rest of them, for they have given a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she has." Now, the widow had done this in public, so it's not the public part of this that's the problem. It's the heart issue. Why are we giving? Are we giving to be seen? Are we giving to be noticed? Are we giving to somehow make up for the bad things that we've done? Or are we really in humility giving because we know that everything is God's and we're just obeying his command? Are we giving from our surplus, or are we giving everything that we have? David said at one point, "I'm not going to give an offering that costs me nothing." Many times we look at generosity as when we have extra, that's what we give. But real generosity, The following Jesus kind of generosity means we give everything, that everything is his. And we don't make a big deal out of it when we're generous, when we give to others. Jesus said, be quietly generous. How can we put that into action today?